Peter, welcome to the Sea Shed, man.
Thank you, man. It's good to be here.
Last time I did a podcast with you, which was a couple years ago, you had me eating, was it Carolina Reaper jerky?
Yes, that's right.
While trying to do a podcast.
Yes. I think you sweat through your entire shirt, if I remember.
I think I cried.
Yeah. And then I think Ryan. I think he cried.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It was a great time. We'll get into all that later and more. So first, Peter, I know you, first I met you years ago at a podcasting conference because a mutual friend named Joshua Dorkin, who's a homie of ours, was like, you got to meet this guy. You guys were like buddies at what do they call it, like a conference buddy? I don't know. You guys were hanging out. So I came in and crashed your conference party.
I think you hung out with me.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. And I was like, yeah, Josh Dorkin, leave him alone. I'm going to hang out with you now. So I know you as a podcaster. You had a podcast for years, and Josh was on it. I think I was maybe on it. And I loved that concept. We'll get into that maybe later. You no longer do that podcast, though, right?
Yes, right.
So I knew you as a podcaster. I knew you started a successful meat stick company called Mission Meats, which I have been telling everybody about for years.
Yes, thank you very much.
I still eat them every day, just about. I didn't have one today, but I have a whole cupboard of them. Father of 4, amazing kids,
thank you.
And now a business coach, and you help a lot of men kind of primarily men, right? That's your niche right
Primarily,
now.
yeah.
Primarily men, helping men grow businesses and be good people while doing so, which fits with the better life kind of concept, right? Yeah. You don't have to just be wealthy. You can grow a business and have family and all that. So, but before all that, you were somebody else. Before I met you, before you were the Mission Meat guy, who were you?
Yeah.
Take us back.
Eternal hustler, man.
Eternal hustler.
Yeah. So just like, grew up in a grocery store. I remember when I realized, I'm like, wait a minute, Dad, you sell cans for $1, you bought them for 40 cents. This is fascinating. People will come in and do that. And so like from that to selling product in the hallways of my school and, them getting confiscated and getting in trouble to mowing yards, to selling auto parts in college, to getting an engineering degree and not even utilizing it because I love the grind and I love entrepreneurship. But recently realizing like that I had so many flaws as a leader. I didn't know what it meant to be a leader. I didn't know what it meant to be on the other side of me. And I always call it the pluses or the minuses, right? It's like what makes you really, really good at something also makes you insufferable at some things, right? And so realizing that and realizing like there are a lot of reasons why certain projects failed. There's a lot of reasons why certain relationships failed. And it's because I didn't realize what it was like. I didn't realize, as my buddy called it, the shadow of your strengths. I didn't have a mirror to hold up, right? I just felt like everybody else was incompetent or everybody else moved too slowly, and that caused a lot of problems in my life.
Can you give an example? What do you mean by the plus and the minus, the shadow? What's an example of that?
Yeah, I think so. For me, I have extreme bias reaction and really, really high risk tolerance. So I'm very much fire, ready, aim. Like, let's go. I see something, it's exciting, let's move. And anybody who's standing in the way of that, anybody who is going to say, hey, man, pump the brakes, let's ask some questions, I'm just going to bowl them over. And so that, to me, pluses or the minuses or the shadow of that personality, like that's the shadow, is not realizing, like, wait. The people that want to pump the brakes, those are good people. And that's their strength. And I should see that as an opportunity to slow down. I should see it as someone that is not getting in my way, but actually wants to see that idea succeed. They want to see it through to fruition. They want to see it be successful. They're actually doing me a service, not a disservice.
Yeah, I can see that myself in a number of ways. I'm not quite the ready, fire, aim guy. I'm more of the analyze it 500 times over and then weigh every single option and then 2 years later take action on it.
That would be the opposite.
Well, yeah, that would be the opposite. So then it drives other people like Alex, our amazing creative director of the Better Life Tribe, the guy who sets up all the technology to make this podcast work.
He did great.
Yeah, he did awesome, right? But I'll change my mind like 40 times when I'm like, okay, let's do this. And then it just changes constantly. So I suppose that's the...
That's ready.
Yes. That's it. All right. So you started a lot of these companies. You started young. What was your biggest failure of a company before you landed on something successful?
That's a good question, man. So many failures. I think that, I started in between a few e-commerce companies. I started a SaaS company. And so many failures in there. You want some examples?
Sure.
Okay. I got to pick a few. I think one is because I have this bias for action and I get excited about an idea and I see someone who's feels like they're going to be the yin to your yang, so to speak, I'll just jump right in. And you would never do that in a relationship. You would never do that in marriage. Most people wouldn't. But I do that. And I normally in the beginning, I'll either see all your flaws or I'll just ignore all of them, right? There's like no, my buddy what does he say? My dimmer switch is broken. Like I don't have, like it's either off or on. That's it. And so in that business, I didn't pay attention to the clues. And as I started to see the cracks in the armor, so to speak, I started bringing it up to my wife, and she's like, "Peter, those are so obvious. Like you might be the last person that noticed those things." And so that was an absolute disaster. I mean, I think we had 14 employees. I ended up pretty much doing everything because this person turned out to be a raging alcoholic, just like all of these issues. And as I looked back and I reflect on that, it's like those things were always there.
Yeah. Evidence
was always there. But I didn't want to see them because I was so infatuated with the idea and the momentum and the excitement that I ignored them. So again, bias for action, fire ready aim, like that has definitely, bit me in the rear end several times. And it's kind of humbling, man, because it really takes so much time for people to grow and have the self-awareness to understand, like, okay, pluses and the minuses. Let's like in this situation, I need to pump the brakes and pay attention to the patterns in your life because we tend to repeat them, right? Like we're pretty, we're smart in some ways, we're really, really dumb in others, and it's like, wait a minute, I've done this several times. Like, what am I going to learn, right? Yeah. And so paying attention to those patterns, I think, have started to help me realize, like, okay, in this situation, I really, really, really need to be a Brandon Turner. I need to be like ready, aim, fire.
Yeah, that's good. There's that famous saying, I don't know who originally said it, probably Abe Lincoln, because everything gets attributed to him, about you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most, or you associate with the most. One thing I try to do in my life is as I know that I have flaws, you can call them, or benefits, whatever you want to call it. Like I have pluses and minuses. I like how you said that. And so I always try to think like who has that opposite? Like who doesn't have that? And I want to be more like them. I'll give you one example of that. I am not a very argumentative person. Like if I have a contractor I'm hiring to do work on a project, and then he does the work and he does it wrong, he'll come to me and be like, "All right, I'm all done," and I'll look at it and I'll be like, "That's," in my head I'm saying, "That's wrong," and I'll look him in the eye and say, "Great, cash or check," right? And then I will then go and fix his problem later. And so I look at that and I'm like, that's just, I know that about me and I can't seem to fix it. And then, so either I've had to learn to kind of work my way around it, and I've gotten pretty good at that, where you hire other people to be the jerk, like, and then it's real easy. Or I follow people online deliberately who I don't actually even necessarily like, but I follow them because they exhibit that trait so severely, I hope it wears off on me a little bit. Like David Goggins would be an example. I mean, I love David Goggins, but like he's an example. He's so hardcore that like I don't think he'd have a problem telling a contractor in a lot of 4-letter words to go and redo that project. Yeah. And so I follow guys like that, and I don't want to be David Goggins, but I want to be a little more like David Goggins. Yeah. Does that make sense?
For sure. There's a tool we call 70-30, and I like this tool a lot because it's explained to me and given me a vocabulary and with which I can understand how I've yo-yoed in my career and in my leadership and in my leadership at home and at work. The idea is you spend 70% of your time on your unconscious competence. Now, what's that? Unconscious competence is something that you can do in your sleep, really, really good at, maybe even world-class at. Like for you, interviewing, no problem, right? Behind the mic, no big deal. Behind the camera, talk for hours. I've seen you do it, right? Yeah. Your conscious competence is, you're welcome. Your conscious competence is something that you need to be consciously competent about, meaning that you need to be deliberately getting better at, and it's necessary for your career. It's necessary for you to be better holistically. Now, why 70-30? 70% of your time spent on your unconscious competence, while 30% spent in your growth area where you need to grow better at. Like in your example, like needing to be like, hey, I appreciate your work. You did a really good job. However, I would really like for that header or for that, piece of baseboard to be a little straighter, a little tighter, whatever it is. Now, what happens for me is I'll go 40-60 for a long time or 30-70 for a long time. and I'll become miserable. Why? Because I'm burning up all this bandwidth trying to be consciously competent at things that I'm just not naturally good at. So what'll happen is I'll realize that I'm doing it, and I'll swing all the way to the other direction. I'll go 95.5. Like, man, screw this. I'm not doing all this stuff anymore. I'm not good at it anyways. I'm going to go and spend the majority of my day, 95% of my day, on the things that I'm unconsciously competent about. And then what'll happen? Everything will start falling apart. Why? Because there's still necessary things for you to do. Whether it's bookkeeping for you that you don't like, talking to the contractor in a stern way, whatever it is that you need to be good at. And so that 70-30 is like that healthy balance of unconscious competence and conscious competence. So for you, it'd just be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to spend a little bit more of my day just being a little bit more stern or being a little bit more direct with the people I need to be direct with. They're going to be happy because they're going to know that they did a good job, and you're going to rehire that guy.
Yeah.
That other guy, he has no chance now.
Yeah, when I look at that whatever we'll call it, the flaw in my personality where I'm just so against confrontation, I realize that not only does it hurt me, yet it hurts the other people around me that I'm refusing to be confrontational with, right? When I don't tell the contractor he screwed up, then he doesn't know he did a bad job. No. And now there are people who are ridiculously jerkish when they, yelling at contractors and all that. Like, that's not what I want to be either. But there is a very direct way to help people, especially when it comes to employees. You and I both had a lot of employees over our years. And if I'm not being direct with my employees, like, how are they going to get better and have more income in their future and work less if we're not the ones coaching them through? And how do you coach somebody other than, help them get better at the things that they should get better at?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we call that support and challenge, right? And so, like, you were supporting that contractor by not telling him what he needed to do, right? You were protecting him from a potential confrontation. Yep. But what happened was he's not going to get rehired by you. So he's not going to have an opportunity. He's not going to have an opportunity to be better, right? And if everybody does that with him, he's going to be like, man, I don't know. I just do one job for people and they never rehire me again. I mean, they tell me I do a good job, but I never get called back. I don't know what's going on. Yeah. And if he's not aware and then you don't help him be aware, now you're doing him a disservice as well. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, man. It definitely something I'm trying to work on. Any advice for me on that? On being more, you're the coach here, man. How do I be more direct with people?
Yeah. And so I said support challenge, right? Yeah. And I don't want to be too heavy on the call, but like we have something called the support challenge matrix. And just imagine, an X and a Y axis, challenge on the X, support on the Y. And when you are in a lot of support and no challenge, you're in protector mode. You're protecting them. You're really protecting yourself from a potential confrontation because you don't want to deal with it. Yep. You're like, you know what? I'd rather just fix it and redo it. I just don't want to deal with the situation. Or, like you said, the people that are really, really direct and they're jerks about it, they're a dominator. They're all challenge, no support. And they're just like jerks and they're direct. And what you want to be is in the upper right quadrant, which is calibrated support and challenge to that person. So I'll tell you what calibrating means in a minute, but that's liberator category. That's liberator territory. You're going to liberate them from their maybe lack of consistency, their lack of quality of work, those sorts of things. You liberate them. You become a liberated leader, and you liberate them, right, from all the things I just mentioned. And that's where you want to be. And what I mean by calibrated is some people, they might not be able to handle too much directness. So you're going to give them just enough to where they know you like them. They did a good job, you're going to hire them again. Other people might need to be a lot more challenged. They might need to get a lot more challenged so they can hear and you can get through to them. And so learning people's personalities, you can calibrate that support and challenge to that person. So that's my advice to you.
Well, thanks, man.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, before we get too deep into the interview and your story and all that, one thing we do on this show is we donate 100% of the ad revenue from every episode directly towards a charity, a cause, a mission that is near and dear to your heart, something that maybe breaks your heart, and we want to support. So, what are we throwing our cash at this week?
I love that, and I love that you do that, man. I really appreciate that. This one's a little different, and so it's an organization out of Placentia, California, called the Training Lab. And they're an MMA gym, and they have really a lot of premier fighters like, I won't name drop, but a lot of fighters that you would know in UFC go there. But one thing that they do is they have got a nonprofit, and they support vets who have PTSD.
Really?
And they also support children that have had near drownings, like really incredible stuff. Now, why do I know this? Is because you know this, and we'll share this part of the story later, but my 14-year-old, she was 14, she's now 15, she's here, had a stroke last summer. And I got connected with these guys, and they've got hyperbaric chambers where they do They put you under pressure, and it's there because for the fighters because they have a lot of head injuries, but it's also there because it helps with PTSD, and they have kids, incredible stories of kids that have had near drownings that really they're being told they're going to put this kid in a home, and that kid by their next birthday is like running around absolutely normal. And so there's an incredible group, incredible family, and incredible cause. So, I mean, they've showed us so much love. And you know, Windsor, who's here now, she's just, you know, less than a year out from the ICU at the Children's Hospital, told that she was not going to recover. Yeah. She's fully recovered. You saw her today. And so that's the cause.
All right, man. Let's go to the stroke. I remember when that happened. A mutual friend of ours texted me and was like, "Hey, you need to pray for Peter and his family." Yeah. What happened there?
Yeah. It's crazy because it's a year later, and it's hard to talk about. I mean, dude, it was, you know, over the course of a weekend, she was being quieter than normal, and we just thought she was like moving into teenage years, and you know, she was being quiet and kind of standoffish. And it culminated on church, actually on Sunday, where I'm coming out of service, and some of her friends come running over, and they're like, "Dude, Windsor's acting weird." We gave her water. She's like stumbling around. Water poured out of the side of her face, and we get upstairs, and she's stumbling around, dude, like she's wasted. Yeah. And there's medics on staff there. The medics come, and they're like, you know, basically they do all these tests, and they're like, "Oh, she's probably having like a kind of a mental breakdown. She needs to go see a, you know, therapist or something." And so I'm walking her out of the church, and you know, people have known now that something's going on, and so I'm like, "Hey, let's not cause a scene." I didn't want her to be embarrassed, so I'm like, "Just hold on to me. We'll walk to the car." And as we're getting closer to the car, I see that her left arm's retracted. And as we get even closer, I can hear her foot dragging on the ground. I'm like, "Hey, are you having trouble walking?" And she's like, "Yeah. She can barely get it out." Mm-hmm. And I'm like, "Oh, no big deal." I'm acting cool. I'm like, "No big deal." You know, get in the car. I text Melissa, my wife, and I'm like, "You better, like, you got 30 seconds. I'm leaving you here. We're going to urgent care." Get her to urgent care. They think she's had a seizure. We get over to the ER. I can't go in because it's COVID. My wife's in there for like 3 hours. She texts me and is like, "Hey, they want you to come in now. There's news." They said it's news and it's not going to be good. Mm-hmm. And so we get in there, and she's getting strapped into a gurney. They're about to airlift her to the Children's Hospital about 30 minutes away. And that's when they were like, "Hey, she's had a stroke. We've literally never seen this before in a 14-year-old. And I asked the head of neuro there. He's like, "Do you have any questions for me before she gets flown out?" I'm like, "Yeah, you know, what's the recovery protocol for this?" He's like, "Oh, there's no recovery. This is who she is." And dude, I could have killed this guy. I have no dimmer switch with my anger too. Like I was gonna murder this guy in the ER. And so I literally back up from this guy because I'm like, "I'm gonna hurt you right here in the ER." She gets airlifted. I'm driving like 100 miles an hour, like a bat out of hell, to the Children's Hospital in Orange in California, and I hear her landing on the building as we're pulling into the garage. It was just surreal, dude. And long story short, like I told you, man, she's fully recovered by the grace of God, like through a new friend. I mean, guy I barely even knew. I'm coming home at like 11 p.m. at night, still in my church clothes, and he texts me. He's like, "Dude, where are you?" And I'm like, "I'm getting some clothes and taking it back to Melissa. She's going to spend the night there because we can't have two parents there." He's like, "Come by, I'm going to pray with you." And I tell him this story about what the head of neuro says, and he's like, "Dude," he's like, "he doesn't know the God we serve." And he's like, "And I've got some connections for you." He's like, "I'll be getting back to you." So he connects me with Training Lab. And as soon as we get out of the hospital, dude, like we're getting, she's had 60 hyperbaric treatments there. She's had 3 brain scans there. She's on a crazy nutritional plan. And the hospital can't even understand it. They're like, they haven't seen recovery like this ever. And so they're actually using some of her data now in the medical community because they've never seen that sort of recovery. And so it's an incredible testament to our faith. It definitely deepened some relationships and created a lot of new ones. But also, man, it was one of these moments where maybe it's a watershed moment. I don't think I even know what that means. But it was like one of these things where you had an opportunity. It's like a fork in the road. You can either go left or right. Like you can either lose all your faith or you can gain it all, right? And I remember being so angry, dude, and praying harder than I've ever prayed in my life. But in the end, it was like very, very clear that this is the path for our family, and we were meant to learn something from it. And also for me, as a coach and as a leader in the community, it was an opportunity to be a light, like be an example. And knowing parents that have lost kids, I'm like, man, this was really gnarly, but it wasn't that. This was terrible, and I couldn't believe it. It was like, Brandon, I felt like we were in a movie.
Yeah.
I'm like, I remember it happening and being like, dude, I cannot, like, is this happening? What is this? Is this for real? Like, I couldn't believe it, Thankfully, we've got 4 kids. Thankfully, we had some family friends that took the other 3 kids, and they had them for 5 days while she was in ICU. But it was just one of those moments, man, where, and I'm thankful to have it, because I thought to myself, I don't really give 2 craps about the stuff that I'm working on.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing? Like, if I died today, would I be happy with the way that I spent it? And I wouldn't. And so that was around the time where I'm like, dude, I'm leaning into coaching, because like that is what I was put on this earth to do. And so much of my life has been spent on doing things that I'm really good at, but not what I'm great at. And what terrifies me, and what should terrify the listener, is like so many of us have landed in careers just out of happenstance, right? Like you happen to be down the street from, the mechanic shop, or you happen to be, like I went to engineering because I liked cars and my brother was an engineer. I could have been an engineer. I could have worked that my whole life. There's nothing wrong with engineering. I'm just not the right guy for it.
Yeah.
And so that was one of those moments where I was like, dude, what am I doing? Like, what am I working on?
Yeah.
This stuff doesn't mean anything.
There's a quote I read online the other day, and it said, in 30 years, the only people who will remember that you worked late are your kids. The only people who will remember that you worked late are your kids. And it was such a gut, like, oh, you're right. Like, I don't have a boss right now per se, but I've got 1,500 of them, like with my investors, right? I've got, but like they're not going to remember the extra hours I put in. They're not going to remember how hard I missed, my kids' dance thing because I went to that conference. It was so important to go to that conference. Yeah. And it's like, no one's going to remember that except for the 2 people that I don't want to, right? Like, yeah, it's like, how do we avoid that? So question for you, what advice do you have okay, your situation was terrible to go through, right? In fact, when you guys came up today, you got to my house, right? Like, I totally forgot in the moment that she ever went through that, because there was zero indication that there was a problem. So what a cool full circle moment there, her coming here and just like everything was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So first of all, amazing. And yeah.
Thank you.
What's your advice though for other parents? Because everyone's going to go through something. Like almost every parent goes through something, whether it's a sickness, disease, the kid gets their face smashed in the concrete. Like one of my good friends recently, his kid had a wipeout at a skate park, and it like permanently damaged the kid's face, like surgery, and it happens to all of us at some point. What's your advice to parents who have not yet maybe gone through that, but they will? Like, what can you speak into them right now?
I can tell you right now, like, without a doubt, not having community would have been just devastating. Like, I mean, dude, we go from urgent care to ER to, ICU, and we're at urgent care for like 25 minutes. Before we left there, our friends were there picking up our kids. Dude, I can't even tell you, hundreds of text messages, thousands of people praying for us. I can't imagine what we would have done without all that support. We had meals for weeks, like every single day, meals showing up at our house. We didn't organize that. And so I think for me, I would be, and this is not like in a self-serving way, I would be building community like an MFer, man. Like build your community. Know your neighbors. Because they're going to need you sometime, and you want to be that person. Like, I can't wait to be that person for somebody. I don't want them to have some sort of catastrophe in order for it to happen, but I can't wait to return the favor.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have community, man, you got to get out there and build it.
Yeah. Any advice for people who maybe are struggling with that right now? They feel like they're just alone in their world. They don't, like the idea of community has, it's struggling, I feel like, in America. And maybe there's a resurgence happening, but there's a book called like Bowling Alone. It talks about this. And the idea is like bowling used to be a community sport. People would go out and bowl together. And now the only people who bowl are people who bowl in alone.
Wow.
And it's this idea that religion has declined in America, nothing's really taken its place to replace that community aspect. So any advice on people, how do you get those lifelong relationships or those deep relationships that matter?
Yeah. You have to, and this is going to sound trite, dude, and maybe overly simplistic. You have to actually care. Like, Melissa gets annoyed with me with this stuff, but like, I'll go through grocery store, coffee shop, or whatever, and I almost always do this. I don't know if I did it today because I'm on 4 hours of sleep, but you go to the coffee shop and you'll say, "How you doing?" And what do they say?
Good.
So what's going on?
Oh, not much.
What's interesting in your world? Like, I'll keep going.
Yeah.
And it'll get awkward.
Yeah.
It's freaking awkward. I don't like doing it. Like, I don't like doing it.
Yeah.
But I remember being at the grocery store and same thing. How's it going? Good. Check me out. Swipe my card. So what's going on? Well, having a rough day. My bunny died. Like, true story. And I'm like, dude, if I hadn't asked, I wouldn't know. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. That sucks. Like, how can I help you? Like, I don't even know this girl. She's just a cashier at the register, at the register of the grocery store. And we just had a good conversation.
Yeah. And
she felt heard and seen and like somebody cared. Like, you have to actually care about the people you're talking to. Like, ask questions. Linger a bit. Linger even longer. Like, we're the last people at church. We're the last people at the parties. We're the last people everywhere. I think you're the same way, right? And there's a reason for that. Because, like, I actually care. I actually enjoy having conversations with people.
Yeah.
We literally have a friend problem. I was telling Melissa, I'm like, dude, can we have, like, one night where people aren't, like, just stopping in and having coffee, right? Dude, one of the most interesting hacks we have at the house right now is I bought an espresso machine during COVID for myself.
Yeah.
It was right before COVID. It was for my 40th birthday. And I didn't know COVID was going to happen. It was like 2 weeks prior. It showed up, and then the world shut down. But, dude, I don't know how many people I've made lattes for.
Yeah.
And it seems like the stupidest thing, right? But I'll make you a beautiful latte when you come over. And you're going to feel like I actually care about you being at my house.
Yeah.
Our neighbor's mom visiting from Canada would walk down to the house, sit at the bar we had at the last house we were at, and she would order a drink like it was a coffee shop. And it made me so happy, dude. Like, she felt comfortable in my house. She enjoyed my latte. She knew I'd be happy to serve her one, right?
Yeah.
Middle of the day. It was lunchtime.
My parents always told me growing up, they always told our family, we had 4 kids in our family, and they always said, we want to be the house that all your friends feel comfortable showing up to, even if we're not here. And it's like, it happened numerous times where we'd come home and there'd just be one of my friends like sitting on the couch watching TV. And that never weirded my parents out. Like, because they always said, if they're not here, then you guys are somewhere else. So this house will be a welcoming house no matter what. Yeah. And Heather and I have tried to adopt that here. I mean, in 5 years of living in Hawaii, we've maybe had 3 weeks of not somebody visiting. And it's hard sometimes. Like, community is hard. And especially when, like, they're people that are weird or people that you don't necessarily want hanging around. But it's, I think even the weird people have something to teach you. And,
totally. And you got to get through the weird ones to find the good ones.
That's very true. In fact, we're just about to implement. In fact, we are going to start it tonight, but due to this podcast and due to a lot of things, we're just going to go out to dinner afterwards. But we're going to start every Friday night here at my house. We have this big backyard with the big long 20-foot table, and we never use it. We use it like once a year on Thanksgiving. So we're like, okay, every Friday night we're going to have like just open invitation to all our friends who live in Maui here. Be like, hey, if you want to come for dinner, bring something and come for dinner. We eat at 6. And it's just like people show up, and we might have 10 people, might have 30 people, might have 5 people. But it's just a point of intention, right? Not a point of contention. It's a point of intention where it says, I'm going to deliberately try to foster community here. Because again, like years from now, like when you look back in your life at like happy memories, I feel like most of my happy memories are with people surrounded in community.
Yeah. For sure. And it has to be inconvenient. It's going to be inconvenient sometimes. And so here's the thing. You're talking about like, maybe it's the lack of religion or the decline of religion, nothing replacing it. I think we've also become so incredibly independent. Yeah. That not only do we want to be independent, but we don't want to inconvenience other people.
Yeah.
And so we're not dropping in. Like, when's the last time somebody dropped in? They don't have to anymore, right? Because they can just shoot you a text message.
Yeah.
But before, what would they do? They would come over and knock on the door.
Yeah.
Be like, hey, is Brandon home?
Yeah.
Can we hang out?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so we've lost all of that, dude.
Yeah.
Like some of my favorite moments in our communities where people just like drop by and they know that we're going to be okay with it, right? And the house is going to be a mess and I don't care, you know?
Yeah.
And we got to be okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful, man. Yeah. You know, the part about caring, there's a way to communicate that. And I'm going to use a very specific example. When you got here today, I mean, you had a long travel day. You have, drama with work sometimes. You had you got a whole busy life of your own. You got on my front porch on my lanai up there, and you sat down. You looked at me in the eye, and you said, "Man, how are you? Like, how are you really doing?" And like something in that, like I was just like, I don't remember the words I said, but basically, it's hard, man. Like I'm struggling right now a little bit. Not like a drastic way, not like my kids are hurt, but I just feel it feels heavy, and I'm carrying a lot of things right now, and I don't have the systems to support everything at the same time. So I'm just feeling like what did I say? Butter scraped over too little bread. Like
Yeah,
the
it's a
Hobbit.
good one. I like it.
Yeah. So, but like, it led to a good conversation we had, and I think you really did help you helped me quite a bit just in that 20-minute, 15-minute conversation we had. So, and it was something about the way you asked. It was not like, "Hey man, how you doing?" Which is a very different thing than saying, "Hey, how are you doing?" Right? It's such a simple twist that if you'd been, "How you doing?" I would have been like, "Great, man." It's fascinating, man. All right, let's get back to your story.
I love that.
All right, how'd you meet your wife?
I always say we met on vacation,
Okay.
but we met on spring break.
Okay.
And it's everything you just imagined.
Where in spring break?
In the Bahamas.
Okay.
She was 19, I was 20.
All right.
We were on some booze cruise down there.
Yeah.
She was living in Iowa, still going to school there. I was in Orlando with me and like 30 car club buddies. I mean, it was awful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did you like say something to get her? Did she notice you first? Where'd that come from?
Well, she says I noticed her first. I didn't remember, but also it's probably because I was incredibly intoxicated. But we met like in a bar at 2:00 in the morning. And it was kind of crazy, man, because we ended up chatting and we talked until the sun came up. And it was weird. And I remember her like, it was like, second to last day we were there. And she's like, "Man, do you think we would have worked out?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do. And we will." And we were long distance for 2 years, man. It was crazy.
Really?
And luckily I had started my business, so I had a little bit of money. And so I was traveling. I would either fly up to Iowa, which I didn't even know where it was when I met her. I'm dead
I was
serious.
wondering how you got in Iowa.
Yeah. Always a girl.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's always the answer.
Yeah, it's always a
How'd
girl.
I get in Washington, like the armpit of Washington
It's
State?
always a girl.
It's always a girl.
It's always a girl.
Yep.
And so, or she would travel down until she graduated. We got married and then lived in Florida. But yeah, that's how we met here. And the crazy story is, most people don't know this, the day before I left to the Bahamas, basically a stranger was in my parents' house. He was like the new boyfriend of a lady who was a widow. And he goes, "Hey, you're Peter?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Come over for a second." It's an old guy. He goes, "You're going to the Bahamas, I heard." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You're going to meet your wife there." And I never saw him again.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
That's wild, man.
Yeah.
What are 3 things you love about your wife?
Oh, man. So she's an artist and I'm an engineer, right? I have an engineering degree. So we're like polar opposites in so many ways, especially in how we think. What I love about her, dude, is she feels like she was born to like parent and school these kids. And I feel so incredibly fortunate for that, man. She's also all the patience that I'm not. I always joke about how like I'm just there in the relationship to just balance it out and screw up the things that she's making work really well. So incredible wife, incredible parent, and so incredibly patient and loving and understanding. Most of the time I don't deserve it. So those are just a few of the things.
I love it, man. I love it. What about your kids? Tell us about your kids.
They all look adopted. And you've seen them all, so you know what I'm talking about. They all look adopted, but they're all mine. Yeah, man. Windsor, she's the one we've been talking about a lot of this time. Just an incredible singer, leading worship in the high school worship team. Summit, leading drums on the middle school worship team. He's like super crafty.
I love that name. I love all your kids' names. You have the coolest name.
Thanks, man. Super crafty. He's on his second business. He's only 13, so it reminds me of me a lot. Brighton, she's 11, and we named her perfectly, dude. She's like the bright light in our house, bro. Like, she'll talk your ear off, and she doesn't care if you're an adult or an elder or a 3-year-old kid. You saw her here with Rosie when she was little. Like, she will talk your ear off, and she just loves hanging out with you. And I remember when she was like 6, I was complimenting her because, we did about 30,000 miles on the road in our RV for over a couple of years. I was like, you know what I like about you? You can make friends everywhere. And she did. Everywhere we went, good friends for life, right? Like, arms around them within a couple hours. And she's like, oh, Dad, it's easy. I just say, will you be my friend? And I say yes. So very confident. And then Ayers, who's my little guy, he's 8, blonde hair, blue-eyed kid, and we're both dark hair, brown-eyed people. It's just funny. Like, he looks straight adopted. It's really funny. He got all the recessives. That dude is just a fire plug, man. And he's an incredible skateboarder, super witty. He's freaking hilarious. I walked in the house the other day, and it's like 5 days ago, and he had his older brother put tats on him with a pen, including like the I love mom with the heart and the arrow through it on his arm, on his bicep, and 3 tears on his face.
The tears on the face.
And he wore those through TSA yesterday, and they all looked at him like, dude, that kid looks gnarly. So those are the kids, man.
Wow. I love it.
Yeah.
I love your family. Good
Thank you,
people.
bro.
You know, I think you brought up an interesting point. When I look at Rosie, she is she's so perfectly named, Rosie. Like, she's just such a girl, loves her flowers, loves that stuff. And then Wilder is just a wild man. Like, I call him Wild Man, right? Just crazy. I wonder how much, I'm curious your thoughts on this. How much of that is because we as parents have named our kids, like, especially us who, chose kind of more unique names. We name them something, and then we treat them that way because of their name? Or how much is there something more mystical or deep going on where they live up to their name?
Yeah. I think it's both, man. Nature and nurture for sure. You've seen this as a parent, and I'm sure the listeners also seen this with kids where they've been around. You see early on, dude. I mean, like, as early as 6 months old, you'll see them make a face or a smile, and you're like, dude, that's you.
Yeah.
Like, you could see like a glimpse of them at 16 or 30. You're like, that smile is going to be there, right? That smirk, that laugh, like the way that you like my 8-year-old, man, the guy, kid is so freaking witty, man. Like, he will just get you, and you'll like, it'll make you laugh because you're like, I cannot believe that just came out of 8-year-old's mouth, And so I think it's a little bit of both, man. I also think God has a sense of humor, and he's like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll see, about this. This will be funny. So I think it's both.
Yeah, I think it was Michelangelo, or one of the famous old sculpture guys, who once said that when asked how he does it, he's like, well, the David sculpture was always in the marble. I just had to like chip it away until it was there. Mm-hmm. I sometimes think that way about names. Like, I'm convinced that we don't name our kids, we discover their name that was given to them ahead of time. And I might be totally off on that, but I like that thought of like, they were like, God had a name plan. Like, Rosie was there. That's why you feel around names for so long, because you're trying to discover it even before you know what your kid is like. They're in the womb, and you're discovering their name, and you play with 50 different things until one goes, that's it, and it resonates in your soul because I think that was their name. Like, that was meant to be. So yeah, I'm a big name fan.
That's good. And I also know parents that have had a name and been adamant about it. Yeah. And the baby's born and like, that's not his name.
Yeah. Interesting.
I got a different name. That's not the name.
Yeah. I love it. All right, man. Let's talk about where do I want to go next? We talked about the kids a little bit. Let's talk about RV life. I want to know a little bit more about that. I'm thinking about buying an RV. Okay. Where did that start from, and what did you guys do with traveling around with an RV?
Yeah. It started.
You're young. You're not 65 years old.
I'm not 65, and we were doing it before it was cool. Just to be clear, right? For me, dude, it started with something very simple. I was a Florida boy living in Iowa. I could not handle the winter, and it was just wearing at me, dude. Some would say I don't have the constitution. Some would say I don't have the resilience. I don't really care. I couldn't freaking handle it, right? And so rented our house out, got an RV. But I'll tell you what, man, what it was like for me and what I really enjoyed about it was because I like building community, and I make friends everywhere, kind of like Brighton, really. I just had friends everywhere. And so for me, we planned routes around where we knew people lived. So if we knew we wanted to go from Iowa to Florida to California and then, back up to, through Glacier and all that, we would map it out to places we wanted to go and see. But inevitably, we knew someone along the way. And so we'd stay in their driveway, we'd break bread together, and it was the coolest freaking thing, Brandon, because it deepened so many relationships.
Yeah.
Like, so our friend Josh, right?
Yeah.
Dude, I'm up in Whitefish, Montana. Basically, I'm up in Canada. And we're going to go to Glacier. And what's funny is we're parking our RV in a driveway of a friend that I know from Vegas who happens to be up there, which is weird. And then I post on social media that we're in Glacier. I get a text from Josh. He's like, "You're in Glacier, dude? We're in Glacier." And so him and we ended up staying an extra day. And we had the best time on the lake and just hanging out and deepening our relationship there. And so that story I can tell just on repeat over and over and over again about seeing the country, about breaking bread with friends, deepening relationships. Like, all those things are really, really incredible and life-giving. But on top of that, when you're in the RV, it's just your family.
Yeah.
And a very, very limited amount of belongings. And so you're just responsible for yourselves and getting yourself to that next destination and eating together and really having that, like, really deep, incredible bond and friendship and relationship with your kids and your wife. And the other thing is, too, you can't hide from each other. And so if you've got a problem, you got to kind of deal with it because you're stuck in a van, literally, together. And so it was incredible for our relationship. And I'll tell you one other interesting byproduct. Anybody who meets our kids, they're like, "Dude, your kids like ask me really thoughtful questions, and they're really comfortable around me, and they look me in the eye, and they'll shake my hand, and all of that's from our travels." They just had to get used to, whether you're introvert or not, being the new kid at the church or at the playground or wherever, and they had to make friends and they had to talk to people, and they were around us, which we were meeting friends too who were adults, and so they had to get comfortable.
Yeah.
And comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so now if you meet them, they're just like incredibly confident with themselves and in their skin, and they'll hang in an adult conversation any day. And I think out of anything that I gave them, that's the most powerful, because now I can drop them in a situation and they're going to thrive. And that's going to stick with them for the rest of their lives.
And you guys are homeschooling?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we just had a conversation on a previous episode with AJ Osborne, and we were kind of joking about how back in the day, kids, the homeschool kids were the weird ones, everyone would say, right? Yeah. And today, the public school kids are the ones with, masks on by themselves on the sidewalk, not talking to anybody and not looking anyone in the eye because they're all afraid. And I'm like, how the tables have turned.
Totally. We are still very weird, but yes.
Yes, yeah, everyone's a little weird. We're good with that. Oh, man. All right, so you're no longer in Iowa. Talk about that. One thing, and I'll preface it with, in the Better Life tribe, the whole, the mastermind have started, and we have roughly 1,000 people, give or take, in there. We talk a lot about the 10 categories of life, where you look at like your health and fitness, or career, your investments, or financial life, your parenting, your spouse. But then one of them is called environment, and that label environment, and that just means the physical world around you. It could be the town you live in, could be the car you drive, could be the house you live in, the office that you go to work every day, and the environment. And that, although it probably shouldn't be, it affects me so much where my environment was. When I was in Lorain, Washington, I just wasn't as happy. Yeah. You were in Iowa, and now you're in California. I am. So can you walk us through with your change over the last few years in environment and what led to that and what it's done for your life?
Yeah. And so, not everybody has this opportunity, I acknowledge that, but like in the RVing, we were also kind of sampling different parts of the country. Mm-hmm. And really living there like locals, right? So some places we'd pass through. I think we've been to 30 some odd states now, but some places we'd stay. We might stay for a week, might stay for a month, and we were very, very good at living like locals. Like we didn't look up the tourist sort of destinations, although we did some of that. And more so wanted to be like, where do locals hang out? What's the coffee shops feel like? Yeah. That sort of thing. And for me, again, Florida boy in Iowa, I couldn't take the snow and cold. But more than that, I just couldn't take the gray. Like, I really needed some sun. Yeah. And I realized, like, seasonal depression, that's not for sissies. Like, that's a real thing. And it's incredibly bad, right? And so in our samplings, we landed on Southern California for obvious reasons. It's beautiful. And we started staying there longer and longer. And so every winter, we'd stay for a month to 3 months to 6 months and realize, like, gosh, we got to, it's time for us to move. Like, this is a life-giving place. And what's cool about us being able to sample it is we got to see kind of how the kids were doing and if they thrive there or not. And it was very, very clear that it suited their souls as well. All love the water, and all of the sunshine, right? I think all of us like both those things. And so there was always that concern though, right? Like me as being leader, head of the household, whatever you want to call it, I was concerned that, man, is this the moment where they're going to look back and be like, this is when Dad screwed it all up. And so that was definitely in the back of my mind. But selling the house, moving out, we rented for a while just as sort of like an MVP thing, right? Minimum viable product. And realized like the kids were just continuing to thrive and make friends. And because we're homeschoolers, there's a much larger homeschool contingent there. Pre-COVID, now post-COVID, it's massive. But even before that, it was much larger. And just creating options for the kids, skateboarding, horseback riding, like a lot of things that you could do year-round there. And then building friendships. And so it's been life-giving. It's been incredible. It's not been easy. I mean, real estate there, as you know, is quite a bit different than Iowa. I mean, the house that I bought in Iowa wouldn't even qualify as a down payment for the house that we bought in California. But yeah, it's been cool.
Has it gone up in value since you bought it?
The house?
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. And that could have gone the opposite way, of course. But
yes.
One of the arguments we make all the time in real estate is like, if you can afford it, like, I mean, this is something I didn't know when I was younger. So I used to try to find the cheapest house I could. Like when I got started in real estate, buy the cheapest house. So I was so proud of my $80,000 house that I fixed up, and now it's worth $100, or it was worth $120 when I got done with it. And I was like, yeah, I'm living for $400 a month. This is great. Which again, it was important because I needed to be able to pay bills, and I'm not saying somebody go out and buy something they can't afford. But property values have doubled in that area now, more than doubled, really probably tripled. So that house that was maybe worth 120 today is probably worth 360, maybe 400.
Wow. Good,
that's great. Now I wish I wouldn't have sold it, but I did. But had I bought the $1 million house then, and it tripled, it'd be worth $3 million. So if I could afford, and then if you're putting a small down payment, let's say 3.5% on a $1 million house is, what is that, 35 grand? Mm-hmm. Versus on a $100,000 house, you're putting 3,500 down. So the difference of $25,000, let's call it $30,000 of down payment. But then if you extrapolate that out over doubling or tripling a property value over time, it's millions of dollars. So today it's almost like I would love to help people find, how do you buy the most expensive house possible, but do so in a way that you can easily afford, which is why we love house hacking, why I love this house in Maui, which is, I can rent out 2 of the units here and live on the third for free. Mm-hmm. So I'm not doing the stupid thing where I'm, can't afford my payment, but I'm also getting the value of owning a $2 million house that's now worth $4 million, in 5 years. And real estate's wild like that.
It is.
Yeah, were you going through, you had a lot of, I don't know, I'll say fear is the wrong word maybe, but trepidation about buying that house?
No, it's the right word.
Okay. Yeah, so how did you talk yourself into buying this expensive house in Southern California?
Yeah. It's a unique story, maybe not for everybody, but like we were lamenting about real estate in the area that we wanted to be in, and we're like, man, we can't afford to live in this neighborhood. Long story short, an off-market deal, undervalue, fell into our lap by a good friend of ours. He's like, I just don't want you guys to leave the neighborhood. And I thought he had just drank too much whiskey that night. I'm like, man, no way. And so we were able to buy it under market value during the peak of the market, got to lock in at the lowest rate, near the bottom. And so it was beautiful timing, man. And very clear that that was the place we were supposed to be.
Yeah.
And what solidified it is I ran it past a good friend of mine that's a realtor, and we were sitting at the coffee shop, and he looked at me, he goes, how much? I told him, he goes, you might be the stupidest person I've ever met if you don't buy this house. He's like, sell one of your kids, do whatever you need to do. Of course he's kidding, but and so we did.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of fear, man. I mean, real estate there is it's incomprehensible.
Yeah.
The only person that would that I've met that was like, oh, it's pretty affordable here is our mutual friend Steve Chu. I remember meeting Steve in Laguna. He's like, how much are houses here? This was like 5 years ago, and I told him, he's like, it's not bad. It seems fair.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're the only guy I've ever talked to, and it's only because he's in San Francisco,
yes.
Right?
Yeah. I always say that about living in Hawaii now. Every place in America is on sale. No matter where I go, I'm like, whoa, you could buy a house for $2 million here. This is crazy. Like, everything is cheap everywhere for the rest of my life.
Totally.
Because everything's so expensive here.
This is brainwashing, man.
Yeah. It's so, And this is maybe a picture for life in a lot of areas, is so much of fear is based on comparison, not based on actual evidence of being fearful or not, worthy of fear, right? Like, we're afraid of the $1 million house because we're used to the $100,000 house. Even though the $1 million house might rent for way more, it may have other ways to, you can afford it just fine. Like, the fear may be completely unjustified, but it's compared to other things. And so there's magic in there. There's a keynote speech in there somewhere about scaring yourself into doing something.
Well, one of the things you've said to me several times, Brandon, is stop saying you can't and ask yourself how. Right? And that may be not all exactly the words that you said.
That's exactly what I say.
Yeah,
that's all I say.
I thought
I just stole that from Rich Dad Poor Dad. So all of my best.
But they're
advice.
good words, man. And so instead of just forget about the number.
Yeah.
For a minute.
Yep.
And how it compares to everything else that you're used to, and just ask yourself how. Like, how could I make this work?
Yeah.
And then maybe you can't, but at least you went through that exercise instead of having the emotional knee-jerk response of just saying, I can't do it, and walking away.
Yeah. Most people look at situations and they go, yeah, but what if it fails? What if it collapses? What if whatever? And there's definitely, there's good reason to play defense. But I love the question, what if it succeeded? Like, what if it worked? Like, what if that house that you want to buy, what if it worked and you made a living, like you made a life there, and your kids love that neighborhood, and you had energy because of the sun, and you weren't down half the year because it was snowing and gray. Like, what if? It's like just a different practice that we can get into, is saying what if on the good side versus the bad side. And all of a sudden you realize, the upside is so great. And sometimes the downside is, I don't say rare, but a lot less chance than the upside.
Yeah.
We call those like asymmetric bets, right? Where the upside is way higher than the downside. And it's hard to get in that mentality though, especially when you're just used to culture and your family and your history and all that of just being constrained and fear-based. Just trying to live in that abundant mentality it's a stretch.
Listen, man, I want to talk about that for a minute. I wasn't
Please.
really planning on it, but I think that I've run into so many people, and it's not only like I call it the immigrant mindset, but it's just more so a poverty mindset. I say immigrant because my parents, immigrated from Egypt, and $500 shirt on their backs, like that whole bit. So that's how I kind of identify with it. But that is like such a limiter, and it is such a liability, right? It will keep you safe, but it'll also keep you from living out so many dreams because you feel like it's not going to work for you, or the other shoe is going to drop.
Yeah.
I remember, joking with my dad about the worst advice he's ever given me. We had just gotten the RV, driven from, we picked it up in Michigan, drove down to Florida, and he's saying goodbye to me. And we never traveled as kids. My parents worked 7 days a week for like the first 8 years of their business, and then 6 days a week for the next 18. Something crazy, right? Yeah. We didn't go on vacations really. I mean, maybe a couple ever. He's walking me out to the RV, and he goes, "Hey, listen, Peter, I know that you're like hell-bent on this whole thing working, and you bought an RV and all that, but this is the advice I want to give you. As soon as you run into your first roadblock, as soon as something goes sideways, just turn around and go home." And I go, "Dad, you've given me some really good advice over the years. This is by far the worst advice you've ever given me. Yeah. As soon as it gets hard, you want me to turn around? Yeah. Like, what are you crazy? So we can laugh about it now, but it's like, that's what I grew up in, right? And it was necessary for them. It's like, man, like there was a lot of scarcity there. There was not a lot of abundance. Like they needed to protect it. My parents literally paid off their house with money they put in a box that you had to unscrew and open. And I remember him opening it because he literally couldn't stuff any more cash in it. And this was not a small box, right? And he paid his house off with that. Like, that's the way that they thought, right? And it worked for them. And it was necessary maybe for that generation. But man, does that stick with you, dude. And that will limit so many things. So I love what you said. It's like, what if it does work?
Yeah. What if it does?
You're guaranteed for it not to work if you don't go after it.
Yeah.
Like that 100% guarantee it's never going to work. And so what if it does work?
I have a friend who once told me a few years ago, he said, yeah, when I run into problems or like when I'm trying to pursue a business idea or whatever, and I run into any problems, I take that as the universe telling me it's not the right move, and I quit. And I was like, that's the worst advice I've ever heard. So it echoes your dad. Maybe they were friends with your dad.
Maybe they're hanging out. They're having a drink.
It was an
right
older
now.
gentleman though, so I wonder if maybe it's a generational thing. I don't know, but
Could
it's fascinating. All right, so how do you balance? Let's talk about this. As an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, you've done lots of this stuff. How do you balance persistence and sticking through a business idea with it's just not the right idea. It doesn't have product market fit, or it's just not the right thing. I need to give up, or I need to pivot and do something different. How do you balance those two things? People say, stick with it and you'll get there. But it's not always the case.
Yeah. I surround myself with people that are way smarter. And it doesn't mean that they have all the answers. It doesn't mean they're right. But I will talk to them and I'll ask them, like, hey man, like if I need digital marketing help, or if I need help with supply chain, like it doesn't really matter. I know people everywhere. And again, this goes back to community. So another plug for community, right? Just asking people who can do it in their sleep, like who's got an unconscious competence for this?
Yeah.
Right? Real estate, I don't know how many times I've called you, bro, where I'm like, hey man, I don't know, dude, this like house is doing really well, but should I get rid of it? And you're like, Peter, it's so simple. Like it's one simple calculation. I'm like, okay, thanks, bro. Like I would have lamented about it for 6 months or a year, maybe held onto that property forever.
Yeah.
But instead I sold it, right? And the next property we sold was on that. I didn't have to call you because it was like, oh, yeah, that's right. Brandon said this. That's right. I'm going to do that calculation. Oh, no, of course we're going to sell this property. And it worked out really well.
And now that property's probably worth $1 million more, and I just screwed you over.
No, dude. It went down in value.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, it worked out really well. So a story for another day. But for me, it's asking those questions. It's paying attention to the clues. I probably persevere too long. Because I don't want to lose, man.
Yeah.
Like I want to win. And some people are like, I don't really care about winning. It's about the game. I'm like, I want to win. Like I want to freaking win. And so I'll stick with it a little too long. But at the same time, it's like paying attention to the clues, figuring out what's not working, talking to people who have an unconscious competence in that lane, and continuing to pick at it until you're like, you know what? I feel like this has been a good go.
Yeah.
Like I tried. I cannot finish this race.
Yeah.
I've tried and I can't finish this race. Now we're not going to persevere any longer.
Yeah.
That's my advice. It's maybe not the best advice, but that's how I look at it.
I think that's smart. I'm reading a book. I just finished it today called The Road Less Stupid, Keith Cunningham. And he talks in there about the importance of having a board of directors. Even if you're like a one-person company, having a board of directors, a group of people who you can rely on for advice, who are not afraid to say you're a moron, like you did that wrong, like that's stupid. Because again, it's like that you said earlier, the unconscious competence, right?
Yeah.
Like when somebody comes to me, if they were like, hey, what do you think about this real estate deal? Like I'm pretty good at being able to like look at it and tell them if it's my thoughts on it, or at least tell them all the dangers. Like, oh yeah, this is what I'd watch out for, or you didn't add capex into your calculation, whatever those things are. So yeah, who are those people in your life that you can rely on? I think that's a good question for all of us to ask. And I have resisted that. Having those people and calling them, and for years I've resisted that, and when I really try to think of why that is, it's nothing but ego. Like if I'm asking for help, it means that I'm not good enough, and therefore I don't want to ask for help because I don't want to admit that I'm not good enough. How do I overcome that, Coach?
Well, I think that there's a couple things. I love it, man.
Can we call you Coach?
You call me Coach all you want. I'm like the worst at sports, though. It's just a funny word. But anyways, I think that there's a couple things. It's interesting you said not good enough. I mean, I think there's that apprehension. There's also the apprehension where you're like, man, that person's like so far along.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to relate.
Yep.
Or I don't want to bother them.
Yep. That's huge, too.
And here's what's crazy, Brandon, is like people love to help.
Yeah.
Like you love to be like, oh, I got this knowledge and somebody asked me. This is awesome. Yeah. I got to help Peter like get out of a property that he maybe would have been stuck in whatever. This is a victory. Like people love to help. I don't know. I don't know if I know anybody who doesn't love to help and like share their knowledge. If you ask an old timer like, hey, what was it like? They're going to talk your ear off, right? Yeah. What was it like to be in X or do Y, right? They're going to talk to you about their career. And so I think knowing that people love to help is important. And I think that the ego only gets in the way, right? Like what's ego is the enemy, Ryan Holiday, right? Like ego, there's nothing really good about ego. There's nothing really positive about ego. You can be confident. Right? Like one of my favorite quotes is, and it's from, I forgot what venture capital firm it is, strong opinions loosely held.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. I don't know what
it's an Andreessen or something. I can't remember. Probably. But like you can be confident. You're like, man, I got this idea and it's incredible, but I'm willing to be wrong. Who do I know that's got the unconscious competence that I can run this by and be ready to defend it and be okay if they're like, dude, Peter, you missed it. Like, there's CapEx, bro. Like this deal doesn't work. Yeah. Okay. I'm glad you helped me avoid that. Yeah. I don't need to be the smartest guy. I just want to win. And if I win because Brandon helped me out and I was wrong and okay, that's okay. Right? We get the win together.
Yeah. You know,
So,
the
I don't know if that's
embarrassing,
good.
well, the embarrassing truth for me when I think about when I don't want to ask somebody for help in something is I'm afraid they're going to tell me, for example, let's just say there's a real estate deal that I want to do and I don't ask for help. It's not even just ego, maybe even a bigger piece of it or a large chunk of it is I don't want them to say it's a bad deal, right? And therefore, if I don't ask them, then I don't have to.
You don't have to defend it.
I don't have to. Yeah, and so therefore, I just won't ask, and that's the most ridiculous, ludicrous thing because like I don't want to buy a bad deal, but so it goes back to ego. I don't want to be told that I was about to buy a bad deal. So if I just bury my head in the sand, I don't have to worry about it. And yeah, thankfully I surround myself with a lot of smart team members who help me vet all the deals now because and I put them into place so that I'm not just. Because, yeah, my own instinct is to be super positive about everything and I assume everything's a great deal. Mm-hmm. And so I surround myself with underwriters and very negative people, not personality-wise, but their default is no.
Yeah.
And so I have to convince them. In fact, that's one thing I love about Josh Dorkin. I've told him this before.
He's just default, so negative?
Yeah, his default is always like, no, convince me. Yes. Like, even like when we started the Bigger Pockets podcast, it was like, nah, no. And I'm like, no, we should do a podcast. He's like, no, no one likes podcasts. I'm like, no, this is going to be a big thing. He's like, no, we already missed it. And I had to convince him that podcasting wasn't a thing that we could do. And then when I convinced him, it's that strong opinions loosely held.
That's right.
Because what that superpower is, and this is in no way, I hope people are not taking this as I'm ripping on Josh. It's one of the most powerful superpowers because Josh is the least shiny object person that I know. He does not just go off a shiny object. He sticks with one thing for 20 years because he just says no to everything. Yeah. Unless you can convince him that it's actually worth doing. And that is a superpower because, yeah, it's just, what's that? There's a famous quote, I think it was Einstein or something like that, but just like successful people do a lot of things and really successful people do very few things. It's something like that.
Yeah.
And
so that strong opinions loosely held, that same story that I read that quote on, it had to do with someone bringing a deal, having to be prepared to defend it, like tooth and nail.
Yeah.
And everybody else, even if they loved the idea, they all said it sucked. Yeah. Right? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I think, like for you, and you were asking that question, like what to do about it. It's almost like a muscle that needs to be worked.
Yeah.
To be prepared to defend your idea tooth and nail, and to know that the board of directors, like you were saying, or whoever you're surrounding yourself with, is going to argue it with you.
Yeah.
It's such a great muscle to work.
It's actually one of my fears of being a CEO, being in charge of several companies, is that my team tends to just, because I write the checks, right? So if I say we're going to do something, almost everyone on my team will just be like, okay, yeah, let's do it. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like I need to tell them, and we've had the conversation, like I need you to push me back, because I will be. In fact, Alex is the most negative person outside of Josh, so he will automatically say no to everything too. But Alex has a joke. He always says, "Oh, everyone, put on your raincoat. It's about to rain ideas." And whenever I start talking, and he's like, "Just let it wash off you. Don't let it stick." Brandon doesn't mean it. And I'm like, no, I really mean it. Because in the moment, I mean it entirely.
Yeah.
It's an amazing idea. Mm-hmm. And then later on, he's learned that that's just who I am. I'm going to throw a lot of ideas out there. So yeah, it's like we need to surround ourselves as CEOs with not just people who say, yes, okay, because you wrote the check, but people who are saying, no, that's not one of our rocks. That's not one of our goals. That's not one of our initiatives that we have already defined in a non-emotional setting that we are going to do. So no. So I know you're CEO, but no.
Yeah. And the only way that you can do that, the only way that I've seen that done respectfully and in a healthy environment is because the CEO says what you just said and they mean it.
Yeah.
And the way that they mean it and the way that they show that they mean it is they don't get defensive.
Yep.
We call it triggers and weapon systems, right? So they don't get triggered by those people. And so for me, I'm a pioneer. A pioneer, my triggers are perceived incompetence, somebody threatening my vision, somebody wasting my time, right? And so someone who's going to be asking the questions and shooting down ideas, they're going to be all three of those. If you're asking questions, I might perceive you as incompetent because why don't you just get it?
Yeah.
If you're asking these questions, you're wasting my time and you're threatening my vision. We need to just go, right?
Yep.
And so then my weapon system is a grenade launcher. This is the terminology that we use, which is funny because I have a World War II grenade on my desk, literally. It's been there 10 years. Part of our road tripping, actually.
Is it active? I mean, can you pull it
no, it was a practice one. It has a hole in the bottom.
All
I did. Funny story. I had it in a cup holder in my car for 3 or 4 months because I picked it up in Nebraska.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, he saw me get in my car. He goes, what was that? And I said, oh, it's World War II practice grenade. And he goes, have you looked in the mirror lately? What would happen if you got pulled over and the cops saw you had a grenade in your car? Get it out of your car, man. I go, okay, fine, I'll get it out of my car. But so, dude, if I get triggered frequently and deploy my weapon system constantly, I could say all that I want till I'm blue in the face that I'm okay with people pushing back, but I've demonstrated through my actions that I'm not actually, and people will stop pushing back on Brandon, right?
Yeah.
They'll stop pushing back on Peter because it's like, yeah, bro, you say you're cool with pushbacks, but you're not, and you show us that with your actions, and then what happens is it undermines your influence with those people. You can't have influence over them.
Yeah.
Because every time Brandon shares an idea, every time Peter shares an idea, he wants feedback, but he doesn't really.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to be nodding my head and say, okay. And then we're going to clean up the mess because it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How have you become a better father in the past few years?
I don't know. In some ways I haven't. In many ways I haven't. A book, which I'm sure we'll talk about, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which I think I had recommended to you, and I think you've read a couple times already.
I've read it many times. That's right. You are the first one to recommend that to me.
Well, and that's a notch on my belt because you and I chat, and usually I come away with like 75 book recommendations. I think I'm still going through the book recommendations you gave me 18 months ago when I was here. But like that book, dude, hit me so hard because it's a Christian book. You can read it from whatever angle you want, but just about how sacred the Sabbath is, and like truly taking 24 hours off and unplugging and just being together.
Yep.
And so for me, when I can, I'm not always good at it. I'll take my Apple Watch off, phone's on airplane mode, leave it on my desk, like leave that crap behind, and come downstairs and like truly be with my kids, and see them. And so. When I had the Slow Hustle podcast, I used to have a band that I would wear, and it had hustle on one side and slow on the other, and I would like visually turn it. And for me, it was like this cue, like, all right, bro, like hustle mode's over. Like forget about the emails that just got sent. The emails that are left, all the work left undone. Like you're done with that crap until tomorrow. You're going to go down and be with your kids, and they're going to be excited to see you. And I think the absolute worst thing we can do as parents is kids walking out to the car, you're coming home, you're still on the phone. You pat them on the head. You wag your finger like, just 1 second, 5 more minutes. Shh, be quiet. That's the worst thing we can do. Yep. Like they couldn't wait to see you. And what did you just tell them? Like, Dads, this is more important than you. And then their excitement fades. Yep. And then you get off the phone. You're like, hey, what did you want to tell me? Yep. Hey, Summit, what did you want to tell me? He's like, nothing. Never mind.
Yep. Yeah, it's powerful, man. There's a Brendan Burchard in High Performance Habits.
Good book, man.
Yeah, it's a great book. Yeah, he gives this tip in there, and I'm going to probably butcher it because it's been a while since I read it, but he said something along the lines of every time he goes through a doorway, he realigns himself on what's his purpose in that room. And he used the example of, coming home from work. When he walks through the threshold, like the doorway of his house, he's like, it's like the physical thing you're saying, you turned your thing from calm to, or hustle, slow to hustle, right? It's that idea. I walked in the room and now I left everything outside. This is a new room. And I think there's actually a lot of magic in the rituals of that, like the physical turning of the thing or the hitting a doorpost when you walk into a room. I think when you can connect a feeling with some what's the word? Kinesthetic, yeah, like some kind of movement or action that aligns with a new feeling you want to have, and you can bridge those together. And then when you want to get, this is like Tony Robbins priming, right? Like his whole thing, like you tie the things together, and then you can put yourself in that state by doing that action, like the thing. What was it? It was not a watch band.
It was just a leather band.
Leather band, yeah. Very cool. I have a leather band in a similar way that actually a listener of the podcast, because I was talking, I used to always, I still do when I give speeches, I sometimes talk about how if I want to be more like a certain person, for example, we talked about earlier, right? David Goggins. Like I want to be more of a badass David Goggins type. I want to be able to not just shut down after 20%. I want to go to 100%. Okay, so what would David Goggins do? DGD, right? Like the WWJD bracelets from back in the day. Yeah. But what I always ask is, I really, I admire Elon Musk a lot. Ed Milet, even Tony Robbins, Richard Branson. I look at those guys very much as like these are people. So I used to say WWEMD. What would Elon Musk do? So somebody gave me a little leather bracelet that says on one side WWEMD, the other side WWJD. It's again that reminder, like you can be in hustle mode and you can be in Elon Musk mode.
Yeah.
Like how would Elon do it? Because I admire the way Elon runs businesses and the way he leads. But that's not the most important thing. So anyway.
I love that, man. That's good.
All right, man. I'm going to ask you a few questions here.
Okay.
This is largely for the gram, but it's for, I just like this segment. I don't have a name for it yet, but it's basically, we'll call it fill in the blank. Okay. I'm going to start a sentence, and I want you to finish the sentence. And you can repeat what I say to make it nice and succinct for a statement, but
okay.
I got probably 3 of them here. First one, failure is blank.
Inevitable. Failure is inevitable.
That's good. That was very succinct. I love it. Number 2. This one's a little more big. We'll see where you get to. The secret to my entrepreneurial success has been.
The secret to my entrepreneurial success has been to put in the work and not be afraid of it.
Not for working your way to massive wealth.
No. I think to not be scared of doing the hard thing, to learn and grow in areas that you just don't know anything about. So if you don't know anything about digital marketing, but that's necessary for your career and your business to take off, like roll up your sleeves and figure it out.
Yeah.
You don't have to wear all those hats all the time. I think that's like the solopreneur's, dilemma. You're wearing all the hats and it's necessary. You don't have the budget to hire all those people, so you learn it all, but then you wear all those hats for way too long. You persevere for way too long in bookkeeping or, controlling or whatever, and instead letting those go when they're necessary, especially the things that you're worst at. But the secret to my entrepreneurial success has been to not be afraid of the things that I don't know and to not have ego surrounding those things, and instead to be like, who do I know that can teach me this stuff? And I'm confident that I can figure it out. I'm not going to be world class at everything, but I can get this thing off the ground.
That's good, man. In a similar vein, but let's see if you have a different answer for this one. How do I want to phrase it? We'll say the thing most entrepreneurs don't realize, the thing most new entrepreneurs don't realize is.
The thing most entrepreneurs don't realize is it takes a lot longer than you think. It's not going to be like a, inflection point moment where you get a share on social and everything's going to blow up and it's going to make your world. Those happen. It's extremely rare. Yeah. And most of it's just putting one foot in front of the other. It's slow and steady progress. It's lots of focus. It's lots of long nights. And it's a lot of hard work, man. And so I think that what happens is that the new entrepreneur thinks that, man, I just got to get on Brandon's podcast.
Yeah.
Man, he's going to make my career. And it's not going to be like that. You might get a spike. Joe Rogan might share your stuff. He shared our stuff. And we're going to have a spike. He's not going to make our business.
Yeah.
Maybe if we were homies and we're on the show every single week, that's not going to happen either, right? And so we're looking at these unicorn companies that had some sort of like a ton of luck and hard work involved, and we're trying to replicate that, and it's not going to happen.
Yeah. That's such a good answer, man. For years, I used to think the secret was getting that viral post. I'd grow, it never is. Almost every case of every super successful person I know, I don't know if I can think of one that it didn't fit this mold, which was they worked for a decade at it. It's almost everybody worked. Now, maybe they pivoted a few times, and so it looks like it was a lot faster than it was, but almost everybody I know has just busted their tail for a decade. And there was no necessary, even when we talk about hockey stick growth, even that, I've never really, I guess you could say the last 5 years or 4 years of investing in Open Door Capital was, I guess, unit number was kind of hockey stick. But the number of deals I'm buying, I'm still buying 3-4 deals a year, 5 deals, 6 deals a year. It's just, they just happen to be 200 unit properties now instead of 1 unit properties. But it's not, I never had a viral video until a month ago in my entire life. I never had a viral video of anything social media. I just been working Instagram for 7 years now, so my account's kind of big because I've been working at it every single day for 7 years. If you do anything every day for 7 years, you probably have some success in that, or you need to quit.
Yeah, no. Or you're really, really bad at it.
You're really, really bad at it.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, man, because if you saw behind the scenes of what you were doing, it's probably pretty dang boring.
Yeah.
It's just
it's
just like
work.
one foot in front of the other, really boring, right? And eventually you finish the marathon, but you know what, man? You're like so one foot in front of the other, Forrest Gumping this thing.
Yeah.
Like just, it's just a tremendous amount of hard work and perseverance. The thing that I think the secret sauce is that people need to understand is it's not imperative, but it's helpful if you actually like what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like you actually like what you're selling.
Yep.
You actually believe in it. The best salespeople believe in the product that they're hawking, right? They love it. They're like, man, this is the best things in sliced bread. Like, you should own one. You really should. I believe in it. Now, it's not imperative, but you love real estate.
Yeah.
And it shows, right? People see it. They're like, dang, dude. Like, this is like, I was telling the kids one day, watching you do real estate is like watching a musician on stage. I'm serious.
Thanks.
I'm not blowing smoke. I'm serious. It's like watching somebody like, dude, that dude was meant to play guitar, right? Like you see that person on stage, you're like, that guy. He came out of the womb, guitar in hand, like this is what he's meant to be doing, right? You can feel that when somebody's they're in the pocket. They're exactly where they need to be.
Yeah. And
so if you can find that, I mean, lucky enough to overlap that with your work, and not everybody, some people have to be worm farmers, as Mike Rowe says.
Yeah.
Then, dude, it will. That to me is the only accelerant that I can think of, and still 7 years of trudging along, right?
Yeah.
But 7 instead of 17, perhaps.
Yeah.
Because you're like, dude, I don't care if anybody's watching this crap. This is good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a word that my buddy David Green used with me one time. Is he said, and he was talking about how it was when Open Door Capital started really taking off. He said, "Man, you seem so aligned." And I like that word aligned. Like I was like the alignment was there. And I think that's what, like the guy on stage playing the guitar, he loves it, but he's also just aligned in it. Everything in his life is just in flow, in this direct alignment. And that's what makes it so beautiful to watch, I think. And trying to find that in your own life when you aren't passionate about the thing, you're faking it, and people can tell whether or not you could be the best actor in the world. I mean, I've probably sold, I would guess, 30,000 pro memberships at BiggerPockets over the years. Like all the webinars I did, I bet you 20 or 30,000 pro memberships, and I was so good at it because I actually believe in the pro membership. It's like $40 a month, and you can analyze as many real estate deals as you want. I'm like, how does that not pay back 1,000-fold? It's such a low amount of money for such an amazing. If it helps you buy one more deal or helps you avoid one bad deal, and BiggerPockets is not paying me to say this today, but if it helps you buy one more good deal ever, it pays for it 100,000 times over. So that's what a good business owner or salesperson does. They believe in their product.
Yeah.
So how did you? I mean, as a guy who owns a meat company, right? How did you stay consistent? And I know you've really broadened now and kind of broadened into this coaching thing, but how did you stay committed to that for so long? Do you still just love eating meat?
Yeah.
Or did you love something else about it that stuck with it so long? You stuck with it so long?
Dude, I think for me, e-commerce it's so simple. I told the story earlier about this buying a can of soup for 40 cents, selling it for $1. E-commerce is like my parents' grocery store on the internet.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is interesting, right? And so I think that helped me stick with it for so long. But the thing that I want to actually touch on that you brought up that I think is really critical, and I'm going to quote my buddy Zach Ware, who was head of product at Zappos, just a really incredible human being. For the person that's trying to get aligned, to use the words that the terminology you just used, he's like, because I was talking to him about purpose. This was, I think, 3 years ago. This was really what started me on my coaching journey. He's like, you got to answer 3 questions. If you can answer these 3 questions, it will put you on your path to purpose. You might not perfectly align, but you'll be dang close. It's like 3 simple questions, very difficult to answer. What are your superpowers? What do you want the work to look like? What do you want the incentives to be? If you can answer those 3 questions, you'll be on your path. And so for me, I got a coach, and he's like, what do you want to work on? I go, dude, I don't even know my superpowers. I don't have any, I don't think. I don't know what they are. And so picking away at that, and asking the questions and looking for the clues help you to figure out what those superpowers are. Now, I found out mine, and I was immediately depressed.
Why?
And he's like, Peter, what's going on? I go, these are not marketable skills, man. This is not a job. I can make friends places. What do I do with this crap, And he's like, oh, no, you don't misunderstand. you got superpowers figured out. Now, what do you want the work to look like? You're not going to figure it out right away. It's like when you decide to buy a 4-door Jeep Wrangler. Now, all of a sudden, there's 4-door Jeep Wranglers everywhere. No, they were there the whole time.
Yeah.
Right? What is that? The reticular
activating system. Yeah.
I hate that word, but I can't ever say it. That's all it is, right? And so, like, if you find out what the superpowers are, then you start paying attention. Coaching was right in front of my face the whole time. I just missed it. And so, figure out the superpowers, then you start looking for opportunities to, like, flex those superpowers. And you figure out, like, oh, here are these industries that I didn't realize were even jobs or businesses. Oh my gosh. And it's like, all right, so what do I want the incentives to be? I don't know. Like, now for me, I was continuing to MVP the coaching business to figure out, like, how do my incentives align with my superpowers, align with my purpose, right? And so, like, figuring those things out, I think for the listener, they got to be asking these questions and not be in a hurry for it. This is not like this flash in the pan sort of thing. Or inflection point, right? Like, you're not going to figure it out overnight. I'm 3 years into this journey now of just trying to pay attention to the clues of life. And here's what's cool, man, as I was telling you about talking to people that have the unconscious competence, as I started thinking about coaching, I started asking friends, like, hey, I want you to shoot this idea down. This is what I'm thinking about doing. And time again, they're like, oh, of course you're doing that.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, this is like the guy playing the guitar on stage, like, dude, of course this is you.
Yeah, when you told me you were going to do it, I was like, well, of course you are. Yeah, I was like, that just feels aligned. Jimi Hendrix going, I think I'm going to play guitar. Everyone's like, well, yeah,
of course.
You've been doing it for a long time in your basement. We've heard you. It's like really good.
Amazing. You're not doing it out in public. Yeah. You were on that short list of people I talked to, man. And so time and time again, they're like, of course, man. I have a friend of mine was like, Peter, you've been coaching me for like 7 years. I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? You're losing your mind? He's like, no, dude, every time I'm with you, like, you ask me questions, you're incredible at inquiry, you help me solve problems I didn't know I had, and I leave feeling rejuvenated and energized. And I'm like, dude, how did I miss this, right? It's right in front of my face. I just didn't realize it was a job for me. I didn't even know it was a business. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't have exposure to it. So what did I start doing? I started talking to every coach I could talk to. What's your business like? What does it look like? Help me, like, how do you get started? Started asking those questions and picking away at it. And so I think that if person listening hasn't listened to anything we've talked about, like, that to me, like, ask yourself those 3 fundamental questions.
Will you review those one more time?
What are your superpowers?
Superpowers?
What do you want the work to look like? What do you want the incentives to be?
What do you mean by incentive? Like, what do you want the incentives to be? Meaning, like, how much do you want to make, or how do you want to be rewarded for? Is that the idea?
I take it as, what do you want your life to look like? Okay. Right? Because, like, you could say, I want to make gobs of money, and I want to like hoard cash and buy a bunch of McLarens or something. Or you could say, you know what, dude? I just want to cover all my expenses and work as little as possible. Like, those are the incentives, right? Yeah. You want to have a vacation home in Maui next to Brandon, like, whatever it is, right?
Come on over. We'll have Friday night dinner, Sabbath dinner together. It'll be great.
There you go. But, like, whatever you want those incentives, like, what are the incentives for you? And so for me, I was very, very clear on, like, my ideal life. Like, what does that life look like?
Yeah. That's good, man. Yeah. Really good.
Thanks.
All right, dude, let's move on to the next segment of the show.
Let's go.
This one is, why don't we do the past, present, future? I need some sound effects. I want to get buttons on the table, so be like, it's time for the past, present, future. I don't have it yet. I'm getting it. All right, first question. What advice would you give your younger self? This is past, present, future, so first one's past. What advice would you give your past, that's it, yeah, your younger self, what advice would you give them?
My younger self, so many, you look back at yourself and you're like kind of almost not disgusted, but you're like, man, dude, I was an idiot, right? Has it ever happened to you? You look back, you're like, did I say that to somebody? I said that out loud? Yeah. Gosh, ego. I think my younger self, if I could have gotten this idea of community and mentorship earlier, I would have grown so much faster. And you can't. It's hard for me. Like, I don't like questions like this because it's like, okay, well, I'm where I'm at. Exactly. I'm where I'm at, and this is ordained. And
almost like a twist on the question is more like somebody else you meet is exactly where you were 20 years ago. What advice do you have for them, right? Because because you don't want to change. Yeah, if you go back and change one thing, then you might not ever met your wife.
Totally.
So it's like,
yes. Yeah. So if I met someone that was like me, that's 20 years younger than I am right now, I think that I would I would push on them to make community, build mentorship, not think that I have all the answers, not think that I'm smarter than everyone. Like, there's just a lot of it's surrounding ego. And so I did surround myself with a few mentors, but then when they would tell me stuff, I would just be like, they're old.
Yeah.
Like, you're not even relevant anymore, right? And so I think that I would leave that ego off the table and understand that there's always wisdom there.
Yeah.
Times change, technology changes. It doesn't really matter, right? Like Amazon, Sears, Roebuck, online, it's the same thing, right? And so I think that just appreciating the wisdom that you could surround yourself with, and really, really listening, and removing the ego.
Let me expand on that before I get to the present and future question. I have a mentor, a good friend of mine that helped me through a lot of real estate stuff. And when I told him I was going to go and scale up with mobile home parks, he said, terrible idea. Mobile home parks are garbage. You don't want to own them. I had a friend who owned them and he hated it. Mm-hmm. You should not do that. So how do you balance? Now today, I've got 6,000, 7,000 mobile home park units, right? It's a very good business. I really like it a lot. It's hard. So how do you balance a mentor's or a wise person's advice when it is biased on their own views, mm-hmm. right? So how do you balance what to take and what not to take from a mentor, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I always use this phrase, consider the source.
Okay. Yeah.
And so someone could be very, very knowledgeable, let's say in this example of real estate, but really how much experience did that person have in mobile home parks?
Yeah.
Did he just hear that they were bad? He had a friend that had one and it didn't work out. Like that's not a lot of data.
Yeah.
And so I would put that in my back pocket and be like, okay, Keith or John or whoever it is, right? This person, this guy or gal gave me this piece of advice that's in the cons column, right? This is not a vote. This is a vote not to do it.
Yeah.
I need to go collect some more data.
Mm.
Now, if you told me that person had 5,000 pads or 500 pads, then he's like, hey, listen, this is what's going on in the market. This is not going well. I'm actually offloading all of mine. This is what's going on. I've been doing it for 10 years. That would hold a lot more weight. So I would always consider the source.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's exactly what it is. And I was asked, like at the time I asked, why would he say this? And when I looked at it, it's because his vision of his incentives, like to go right there, like his incentives was to work as little as possible, to have just enough to pay the bills, like, and enjoy life, and then spend a lot more time with family and friends at home. And like that was his vision of success. Yeah. And which is not my vision of success. I like growing big businesses. He thought employees were terrible. You don't want to have employees. But I'm like, I kind of like having a team. I love having a team. There's challenges to it. It's not always easy, but I love it. So again, considering the source and why they say it is what they say. And maybe that's a question I could have fired back at him, is like, well, why would you say that? It's not a good idea. Yeah. And then, my buddy had one. Oh, just one. Like, what didn't he like about it? Like, in working with the mentor, I think had I done that with this guy, I think we would actually probably walked away. I would have walked away better, but I didn't push him on it because I didn't want conflict, right? So circle back.
And we come full circle.
Yeah, full circle here. All right, man. Moving on to the second question of past, present, future. What are 3 things in the present here, like this year, you've recently implemented in your life? Could be an action, could be a habit, could be something you bought, whatever. 3 things you've implemented in your life that is giving you a better life.
Yeah, 3 things. Deep and meaningful prayer, first and foremost, and that definitely set in post-stroke for Windsor, and I shared that earlier, man. Like it's had a huge impact on me, and I think a lot of that is like a release of ego, trying to control the situation, thinking that I know better, I know the way that something's going to go, or I know the way that it should go. I think this actually goes back to strong opinions loosely held. It's like, this is the way I'd like for it to go, but I'm also open to the fact that I don't know everything and I don't know how the story plays out. So prayer is one. The other one, and this is community again, so plug number 763. We started this Friday morning men's group, which actually sparked out of the stroke situation too. And so this dude that I told you, Steve, who connected me with Training Lab, he's like, dude, he texted me one day. He's like, bro, me and you, my buddy Bob, who you know Bob, and a couple other guys are like, man, you guys are Sticker Bob.
I love Sticker Bob.
Yeah, shout out to Sticker Bob. He's gonna love that he got a shout out.
Yeah, to Sticker Bob. If anybody needs swag done, he makes all the Better Life swag now.
He's
doing all of
world class, and he's legendary in that space, man. I actually coach his team. His team's amazing. So it was 5 of us. We met at the pier, 6 a.m. on a Friday morning. And it was just like, hey, dude, we're all going through it. We'll read like a chapter of the Bible and just like talk about what it meant to us. And dude, religious or not, I don't care who's listening. It's more so like we built this brotherhood.
Yeah.
That dude, anybody needs anything in that group. That group's up to 35 people now, by the way.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. It's actually out of control. It's crazy. And anybody needs anything. Like there's like, somebody needs got a prayer request. Somebody needs to get picked up from the hospital. It doesn't matter. Like we're on it. It's amazing. And so that community's really sort of changed the game for me, man. Like it's solidified our relationship to the area that we moved to, right? Just less than 4 years ago. But more so like knowing that you have that many people in your corner, like at a moment's notice that are going to drop everything and come help you out in some way. It's powerful. Yeah. It's amazing. Third thing is, one of the things we coach is your voice order, right? And everybody's got these 5 voices, and I won't get into it, but understanding my voice, and specifically the shadow of my voice, and what it's like to sit across the table from me and deal with my ideas and deal with my pioneering and my fire-ready aim, and also understanding other people's voices. It's helped me to be a much better leader, to be much more understanding and patient. To see their strengths as a strength versus a weakness that needs to be overcome or steamrolled or grenade launched. And what I told you earlier, which is calibrating support and challenge to that person. And being like, okay, I know that when Brandon talks to me, he's going to ask me for all the details. So I better damn sure be prepared when I pitch an idea to him. I better have not all my I's dotted and T's crossed, but a lot more than I would have. Yeah. And then I'm prepared for you to push back on me. And I'm going to respect that you're going to push back because you are not trying to challenge my vision. You're not threatening my vision. You want to see it succeed. You're actually in my corner. We're not boxing against each other. Like, you're in my corner. You're like, dude, homie, I want you to succeed. It's because of that, I want to ask you a bunch of questions. And I see that as an asset. And so it makes our organization more efficient. It makes my friendships more efficient. It makes them much more effective. It makes for a more fulfilling sort of life, man. And so those are the 3 things for me.
I love it, dude. Last question, past, present, future. What do you want your legacy to be? And a way to reframe that question is, when you pass away, what do you want people to say about you?
So this is, this has been sitting here, and it's something called a legend planner, and I'm about to finish my 3rd one, and I have it written down, dude.
Legend planner?
Yeah.
That's like a thing?
It's a thing. Yeah. How do I want to be remembered? I'll just read it to you.
All right.
A guy you just want to be near. He loved to tell stories and make people laugh. A man of integrity whose family was foremost. A man of God who exemplified faith in action. He used his genius to live a life of excellence in every area. He was a masterful coach, getting people to overcome obstacles and make big change. His curiosity drove breakthrough. His relatability built trust.
That's really good.
Thanks.
It's one thing we do in the Better Life Tribe that I'm a big fan of is we call it identity-based goal setting. So it's not basing goals based on what you want to have, but based on who you want to be. And so we, go through like the idea of identity statements of like, this is who I am. But I might even reframe that within the tribe to make it more related to this question of, like not just an identity statement, but what do you want your legacy identity statement to be like that. Like that's powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell me more about this book thingy. What is this? The legend?
Oh, the legend planner?
Yeah. What is the legend planner?
Dude, it's an Amazon planner, right? There's like nothing probably special about this one. I don't know how I landed on it. I think I realized one day that I needed it. And so it's got like this areas of awareness and self-discovery, vision, 50 dreams. I only have 28 on here. Your most important life goals in 8 different areas of your life. And then your 1-year goals, which then break down to your quarterly goals, which then break down to your monthly goals, and I've got them all tabbed. And then you've got your weeks, right? And the weeks have habit tracking in there. Every day I write down kind of like how the day went and like highlights of that. This week's wins, how you'll improve next week. And then I also journal in the back. And so to me, I kind of keep it with me everywhere. And then I've got a laminated sheet on here. And then if we're going to talk about books, but this is from a book.
I'm going to.
Yeah. So
that's awesome, man. Yeah, it's very similar to what I did with like we call the Better Life book. It's basically our journal. It has the same idea. We start with vision, identity, the statements. We go into annual goals, quarterly goals, weekly habits, all that stuff. So
love it.
Very similar, like because that stuff works, right? Like as I was putting research when I built the Intention Journal years ago for Bigger Pockets, when I built the Better Life book now, this stuff works. Like this is what like nothing I'm doing is like it's brand new, and it's reassuring to see things like that. Like, oh, this works for you too. Like it's working for all of us.
Yeah. It's hugely powerful, dude. And one other thing I want to underscore is the importance of reading back through it frequently.
Yeah.
Because, dude, I'll go back through. Like I recently, actually in preparation for the show, I was looking for a quote, and I'm like, I think it was in my second planner. I went through. I started reading some of the things I was working on.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I've come so far.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I like thought about that, and I was working on that, and like I did it already.
Yeah.
And so to see the things that were checked off because you were being deliberate and intentional, it's really, really powerful to go back and be like, man, because in the moment you don't feel like you've gone very far.
Yep.
You're like, I got so much farther to go. I haven't really done anything yet.
Yeah.
And you look back, you're like, dude, that was only 6 months ago. 6 months ago I was planning for X, Y, and Z. That I forgot. That was like this is not even that old of an idea. Look how far we've gotten.
Reminds me of the quote of like the things that stress us today are the things we prayed for 5 years ago. Like it's like, oh man, the sun is just so bright coming in my window here in Hawaii in my fancy $4 million house. Yeah, it's just like, yeah. So
yes.
check our privilege sometimes with that. Like,
100%.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome, man. I found my journal the other day from probably 7 years ago. I think it was the very first like journal I ever bought, like a success-based journal. It was Grant Cardone's 10X journal. It was right when that 10X rule came out.
Yeah.
And it was anyways, I found that and I'm looking through it. And it had things like, like my goal for the quarter was like to finish writing the book on rental property investing. And it was like going to launch that the next quarter. And it was such a big thing. I'm like, man, that's been out for 5 or 6 years now. It sold 1 million+ copies. I would have never thought it would sell more than a few thousand, but that was such a big deal back then. And now it's just one of the books.
That's amazing.
It's fun to look back. I 100% agree. There's a great book out there. Have you read, I rave about it all the time. Very obscure, but it's called Storyworthy, Matthew Dix. I love this book. It's all about competitive storytelling by a guy who's won like the Moth Story Slam, like that. Like they do a lot of competitive storytelling is a big thing apparently.
Okay.
So they just tell stories and then they have judges and they vote on it. But in here, he's got a chapter where he talks about one of the best ways to get stories to tell in general, whether you're an author, a writer, speaker, coach, whatever, is every day just write down like one line of something that happened. They even have books like The Line a Day. I have one of those now. And just like write down a couple keywords like, let the dog out, ran away, had to chase him down with my underwear, like in my underwear. And like you will remember that later when you go back and review it. So I'm a huge fan of that. Like write down what's happening in your life and then go revisit it later.
I love that.
Yeah. It's like a little time machine.
That's good.
All right, man. That was past, present, future. Let's move on to the last little segment of this here podcast. And that is the 3, the 2, the 1. So we're going to start with 3 what I call pivot books. They're books that you've read and that have changed the direction of your life. We'll start there. 3 pivot books.
Yeah.
And
so
why?
one I quoted earlier, Ruthless Elimination in a Hurry.
Yeah.
And I explained why, which is just, it's helped me to slow down. And the last thing I want to talk about with that book is, this is by John Mark Comer, by the way. I realize I'm in a hurry all the time.
All the time.
It's going nowhere.
Yeah.
I'm doing everything in a hurry. I'm eating my lunch in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking the trash out in a hurry. And the most hurtful thing that like really struck the core of who I am is it was Brighton. I think I was passing through the house because I work from the house and the kids are home homeschooling. Like, our home is a zoo. I'm walking by the kitchen or something and she goes, "Hey, Dad, I want to tell you something. One second. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I've conditioned this kid.
Yeah, to think that.
Right?
Yeah.
Dad's moving fast. She better get it out really quick. She better tell me it's only going to take a second because what am I going to say? Not right now.
Yeah.
I got a meeting. I'm starting a meeting. I'm hopping on a show. I got something to do. I got to do something. Sucks, dude.
Yeah.
A bad feeling. Second book.
Hey, wait, let's sit on there just for a second.
Yeah.
I have a buddy who recently told me some advice, and I thought it was just brilliant. He said he just made this change in his life where every time his kid, because he works at home also, every time his kid says, "Hey, Daddy, can you do this?" He's like, I could be in the middle of a meeting, had to run to the kitchen to grab a bite to eat or whatever, and I run back, and if he says, "Hey, Daddy," he's like, I have a rule. I always give him 1 minute at least. I sit down and I talk to him for a minute, and I explain like, hey, I'm in the middle of a meeting maybe, but what can I do? I have 1 minute. It's like this idea of like, I'm going to pause. He's like, at the end of the day, it goes back to the quote I said earlier, but is the person on that Zoom call that's waiting for you to get back from the bathroom going to care if you were 2 minutes late or 1 minute late? No. Will your kid continually care that you've always never had time for them? 100%.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought, the ruthless elimination of hurry that wrecked me too. I'd put that on my book. He made this thing that I think of every single day. He said, we don't stop at stop signs. We all roll through every stop sign. Every human just about rolls through every stop sign. And people are like now listening and going, no, I stop at stop signs. Watch yourself. You won't. Nobody does it. Why? We're in a hurry. There's zero logic to come to a complete stop, pause, and then go. It adds a third of a second to your life. Like, it's nothing, but it demonstrates, why do we speed? Going to the store, that's 5 miles away, and you go an extra 10 miles over the speed limit. You get there less than a minute early. It's like 30 seconds early. What does that do to you? But we have this need to do it because we're in a hurry and we're in this rush, especially in our modern civilization of like, we got to go. So those practices, getting into the practices of saying, I'm going to stop at the stop sign. I'm going to go the speed limit. I'm going to give my kid a minute no matter what, no matter what I'm doing. And those are just practices that encourage us to slow down. So, great book choice.
Yeah, and I also think too, man, is like you'll realize what it does to your heart rate, your nervous system. I mean, you're wrecked all the time.
All the time.
You're in a hurry all the time.
Yeah.
Let's just take a second.
Yeah.
It's crazy to even be talking about that. Second one, Winning the War in Your Mind, Craig Rochelle.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've read that.
That's great.
Dude, so this is the thing that's laminated in my legend planner. Is my 4 lies, my truths, and the declarations, right? Which I wrote for myself. My son, he laminated for me. I keep it in here. And it is such a powerful book, dude, because you realize that these lies that are looping in your head, and you realize how long they've been there.
Yeah.
And you realize how often they creep in. And my favorite quote from the book is, a lie believed as truth will affect your life as if it were true. It doesn't need to be true, but it's going to affect your life as if it were. And so the importance is that these lies are ruts, and you got to replace them with truth.
Can I pry?
Huh?
Can I pry?
Of course, yes.
Can you read one?
Yeah, of
course.
course.
What's a lie and what's a truth? What's an example?
Yeah. Okay. So the book's a Christian book, right? So my truths are Bible verses, and a declaration is based on that. And so I'll read one. One of my lies: I'm a fraud and a screw up. I believe I'm someone I'm not. And here's the thing that's crazy about these lies is when you write them down, you start paying attention. If something comes up, let's say it's a potential successful partnership or something like that in business, it'll immediately crop in. Like, nah, Dad's not going to work for you. This stuff never works. You're not. You can't even fulfill that partnership. You're not that good at it. It'll just creep in. It's powerful. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So that's my lie. My truth, I'll read one of the Bible verses. There's 3 here. For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. Ephesians 2:10. Like, no, dude, I was created to do this. I'm perfectly suited for it. This is the reason that opportunity came to me, because it was meant to come to me. So the declaration is, we are his inheritance, his rich and glorious inheritance. We are his masterpiece, created for good things planned long ago. We are never crushed or driven to despair, never abandoned or destroyed. Through suffering, the life of Jesus may be seen. That suffering may be necessary. So that's one of them.
That's good, man.
Thank you.
I love it. Yeah, Winning the War in Your Mind. I read that book, and then I immediately went on Amazon and I bought the workbook. And I haven't actually done that part yet, but I bought the workbook so I could actually do the work. Because like you can read a book, and it's like, oh, that was a good book.
Yeah.
But I love when they have a workbook where you can be like, okay, now I'm going to take the time.
Yeah.
And like I feel like I need to. Maybe this is a limiting belief. I feel like the reason I haven't done it yet because I'm like, oh, I need a weekend. I need to like go somewhere for a weekend, shut myself in a cabin. But I'm like, maybe the actual answer is just spend 10 minutes a day working on it.
Yeah.
And then I would have been done 2 months ago.
That is what I did.
Yeah.
And it's actually very tedious because I think the hardest part is like, man, what are the lies?
Yep.
And like you realize I didn't want to write them down.
Yeah.
It took me forever to figure the lies out. And even though they're looping in my head all the time, because I'm like, well, that's not really, I'm not going to write that down.
Yeah.
So writing them down is the hardest part. Third one, extreme ownership.
Yeah. Jocko
Willink. And really my takeaway from that book, which I actually have 1 chapter left to read. It's an incredibly long book.
It is a long book.
These 10, 14-hour audiobooks, they wreck me, dude. I'm like, when am I going to have 14 hours listening to this book? Everything's your fault.
Yeah.
And like I told it to somebody recently, like, that's depressing. Why are you saying that? It is your fault. Like, everything's your fault. If you're in a circumstance, you put yourself there. If you've got a bad employee, you hired them, or you're not training them, or you're not leading them well, or you're not explaining yourself well, or you're disorganized, right? Like, all those things are your fault. And if you can own that, then you can move through it.
Yeah.
Right? There's power in that ownership versus being like, oh, well, this happened to me, or I can't believe this person's not. No, dude. Like, it's all your fault. Your home life's a mess. It's going to be your fault. Yeah. Sorry to say it.
Yeah.
So
I think that's some of the best marriage advice too. Is like, yeah, if your marriage is messed up, it's probably your fault. And like, it's like, and it's like, yeah, but you don't understand. My spouse cheated on me. Okay, well, like, how is that your fault? I mean, like, how do you answer that question? Because I've got my own answers, but
yeah.
Like when somebody says, yeah, no, they cheated on me or they stole from me.
Yeah.
Like, how is that my fault?
So I'm going to give you I'm going to tell you a really stupid story. We're at the skate park, San Clemente. There's a guy who is probably in his 60s, incredible skateboarder. And I notice he's like cursing at these kids that are like 9 and 10 years old. And this guy's clearly like losing his mind, like maybe going to do something bad. What do the kids do? They start goading him. They start chasing him around on their e-bike. He finally leaves, goes to the parking lot. They're chasing him around the parking lot. They're goading him. I walk over to the kids, and I say, hey, guys, I don't know you, and I don't know this guy, but what I do know is you don't poke the bear. They start telling me, well, you don't know what he said. And I go, oh, no, you don't misunderstand. I don't care what he said, and I don't care how right you are. You need to own the fact that you're poking the bear and that you're not going to like the consequences. I go, do we want to find out what this guy's capable of? They're like, no. And they actually, the kid said, facts, bro. And I'm like, oh, I'm not your bro. But listen, right? So like they weren't owning the situation.
Yeah.
And even as a 9 or 10-year-old, it's like, all right, listen, I'm in the right, but I also know this guy seems like he's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna remove myself, right?
Yeah.
And so if you've got a spouse and you're like, oh, but they did this, they did that. Well, the thing is, like, turn the mirror on yourself. What have you done?
Yeah.
The most unhealthy relationships I've ever seen is where neither one wants to give ground.
Yep.
It's like, oh, well, Brandon, you didn't empty the dishwasher, so I'm not going to do this, right? And then nobody wants to give up any ground. And instead, it's like, well, what can you do? What have you done lately that has showed love to somebody that you think is not deserving of that?
Very good, man. All right, those are the 3 pivot books. So let's go. 2 people have influenced you the most in your life.
I mean, my parents for sure, man. My parents, because although flawed, we all are. We're broken people raising more broken people, as my pastor says. They showed what it took to like get the job done, and to persevere, and to not be a victim in any way. Right? We were, Egyptians with a grocery store and a trailer park, meth town. Right? There were no brown people around, and I always say that, and I always joke with you. I always make brown jokes because. Melissa hates it. She's like, "Why do you do that?" I'm like, "I don't know. I want to see if we can be friends." And if they like laugh, then I'm like, "Oh, we can be homies." And if they get all uptight, I'm like, "Oh, we probably can't be friends because I'm gonna
we
make
lost
you
half the podcast."
Yeah, right. We're gonna make everybody uncomfortable. But like the reason I bring that up, man, is because my parents never. I never realized it until I was older. They never made it a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, people wrote. And looking back, realizing what was happening, I was so young. People wrote really crude things on our building, graffiti and all kinds of stuff. My parents never made a deal out of it. I didn't even know what was happening because they were just like, no, dude, we're 1 foot in front of the other. This is how we're making our living, and this is what we're going to do. And so I think for them, I mean, they had huge impact on my life. And my wife, dude. I mean, I you asked me questions about her before, and like she has taught me how to be a good parent. Like I would be terrible. Like I wasn't around kids growing up. Like I didn't know, I didn't have cousins around or anything like that. Like I didn't know what kids were like. And I think for me, I'd probably be your typical dad that was like, pat him on the head, send him off the bed. This is the life I live, from Mary Poppins, right? Yep. It's like, I would just be like, oh, you're in the way, seen but not heard. I got things to do, empires to build. And so she's had a huge impact on me, man. And the parent that I am today, I mean, it's all her.
Wow, that's good, man. Last question of this segment. 1 quote you live your life by.
I've got the 2 and I've already used them both, man, which is strong opinions loosely held.
Yeah.
And a lie believed as truth will affect your life as if it were true. And I really want the listener to think about like that voice in your head that creates the self-limiting beliefs, that really shapes your reality, man. I mean, You talk about the 5 people you surround yourself with. Your biggest enemy is in between your ears. Like that's what's going to limit you. That's what's going to allow you to either make the phone call that you need to make or not make, pursue the job or the position or the business or not pursue it. If you believe that you can't, then you will, right? And so I had a friend of mine recently was like, dude, you're like in your 40s. You're starting a new career. You're crazy. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I owe it to society and to myself to go after this thing because I know that this is what I'm meant to do. Is it scary? Yeah, super scary. But the thing is like, I'm constantly, I read that lie to you, I'm a fraud and a screw up, right? I'm scattered, impatient, and lazy. I'm a bad husband and father. It's never going to work out. Nothing is working. Like, those are my lies. Those are all 4 of them. And if I believed those, if I let them like invade my thoughts and my ideas, I wouldn't make the call, right? I would never text Beardy Brandon and be like, "Hey, bro, what do you think? You think I can be on your show, man?" Like, you know what I mean?
You asked. I think I asked you.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? Like, how many questions left unasked because you didn't believe that you could do it? I don't know how many people I know that are very, very gifted, and I'm like, man, dude, why aren't you doing that art installation? I'm like, I don't know if they'll like my art. And those are all lies in your head.
Do you know when I studied for law school, I took the LSAT, I scored really well, and then I never applied for a single school. I was afraid of being rejected. I mean, I'm glad it worked out well, but
wow.
Yeah, I never applied to a single school because of the fear of rejection. There's powerful lies buried in there that I probably have yet to unpack entirely.
Yeah. Well, you guaranteed rejection.
Yeah, exactly. By not applying, I guaranteed I didn't get into any of the schools.
Like you created the outcome you were scared of.
Yeah.
It's twisted.
It's twisted, and I think it was one of those meant to be. God knew what he was doing, probably, but or maybe he just made something out of a mess. So either way, it worked out. Well, man, speaking of the coaching and kind of this new career, are you like, what does that look like from a tangible thing? Is that something you're taking clients on? Do you do one-on-one stuff? Are you a group guy? Like, what does that business look like, and how can people connect with you for more?
Thanks for asking, man. We do group coaching right now, and there's a bunch of different tools and resources and assessments that we put people through depending on their situation. I'm definitely not like a hammer looking for a nail, and so typically help people qualify themselves for if I'm the right guy for you, and if it's the right program. I put together a free guide for your listeners, if that's okay. Yeah. So they can go to petergift.com because that's easier to remember.
Petergift.com. Yes, right. That's a good URL.
Thank you very much. And so there's a guide there. It's called 5 Tips to Become a Better Leader Overnight. So it's just like 5 quick tips. And then we have a free version of that 5 Voices assessment that I mentioned earlier. They can take that. So just email me. You can just reply to one of the emails on the guide, and I'll send them a link to that. So
cool.
Yeah, that's a good way to kind of get them on their way to understanding who they are, the shadow of their voice, and all that good stuff.
Dude, I love it. Thank you for being here today. Thanks for being vulnerable and sharing your wisdom and insights and lessons. So appreciate you.
It's been fun, bro. Thank you.